Joel Bowman, my old friend, Oxford Club, Free Market Cafe. You can find it on Facebook, right? It's nice to see you.
Nice to see you too, Jeffrey.
Yeah, so you and I have been friends for some time. We hung out together at Agora Financial and plotted the revolution, and the revolution seems to be happening, at least according to your latest article.
We did foment a revolution back in the early days. It's nice to see that it's coming to fruition gradually, although the revolutions never happen quickly enough for we agitators.
So why don't you tell me about your thesis? Because the article is something about the A word, and you seem to be suggesting that the world is working itself towards anarchism in fits and starts.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's interesting, you know, when you talk to people and they ask, you know, how would an anarchist state, which is obviously oxymoronic, how would this come about, or how would this work? They tend to think in the same paradigms as the existing state, and they tend to think of it as some kind of like a political movement where people vote, and you know they get together in Congress and they, you know, to and fro, and they hash out things. When really, anarchy is something that seeps into our everyday lives, and it's something that exists in every single voluntary exchange that we have with other people. It's not necessarily something that, you know, is going to come about by referendum or something like that. It's something that we all carry with us, and it's something that exists all the time. And I mean, you've touched on this. Well, you've written extensively about this in your book, A Beautiful Anarchy. So you know exactly what I'm talking about when I say that this exists and it's pervasive, and it's something that the typical political spectrum seeks only to shut down and to cage and to restrict and retard in a way. But you know, this is something that exists in everybody's life, and that can be celebrated all the time.
Yeah, I think you make a good point. It's not some kind of system that to be imposed upon the world like a preset model. It's more like the default nature of human action, really.
Right, exactly. I mean, it's quite the opposite of a system. It's something that is not imposed on people by vote or, you know, at the ballot box. And I think with the decentralization of information, I mean, here you are in Arizona. No, where are you right now?
Yes, Arizona.
Let's just go with Arizona. Alabama, I think you're. I knew one of the A states in the U.S. and
or maybe Alaska. It might be Alaska. I'm not sure.
Alaska, yeah, could be Arkansas.
Yeah.
So we're on different sides of the world, and we can, you know, have a Google Hangout and chat, whatever. So with the increasing decentralization of information, I think people are starting to glob onto the idea that, you know, people don't own them, they don't have to ask permission to go about their daily lives. They can, you know, it used to be such that if you wanted to start a business, then you go in and you apply for this license and you go through all this bureaucratic nonsense and whatnot. Now anybody can be an entrepreneur online immediately. I mean, what a beautiful thing.
You know, I was this morning, for whatever reason, digging through the history of the election of the president Warren G. Harding after World War I.
Early 20s, yeah.
Yeah, and his slogan for election was, "Let's have a return to normalcy." You know, by which he meant let's forget this executive dictator nonsense, this war stuff, the central planning, price controls, and just sort of generally badgering people and corralling people around and haranguing them, taxing them, and let's just have a world which we all kind of live more or less normal lives, you know, and it always struck me that that's a kind of a beautiful vision. Actually, maybe it's a little bit boring for people, messianic visions who, you know, imagine they're going to remake the world according to some preset vision, but actually a return to normalcy is a pretty good summary of the anarchist agenda.
Right. Well, I mean, isn't it interesting that I will have to check my facts here, but I think it was President Harding in the early 20s, under whom the United States underwent a fairly severe economic correction. It was kind of the depression that never really happened. and it was a huge in the stock market, and spiking unemployment, and all the kind of things that ordinarily, or at least today, people would start demanding that their politicians do something. Come on, get out there and do something. Enact price controls, or stimulate the economy, so-called, with trillions of freshly printed dollars, et cetera, et cetera. Well, this actually happened, I think it was 20 or maybe 21, under President Harding, and he sort of just stood back and said, well, I'm just going to let this happen, and the market is self-correcting. It will work itself out through this creative process of creative destruction. And lo and behold, within a year, some of the kinks had been worked out. This was a much sharper correction than came about subsequently later 20s for what became known as the Great Depression. And within 6 months, or maybe it was 12, maybe it was 12 months, we'd already suffered this deep economic shock, and because people didn't step in to guide and to pretend that they knew where the economy ought to be and how many people ought to be employed and at what price credit ought to be set, and all of these kind of feigned fabrications of the imagination, then the market ran its own course and corrected in due time. Lessons were learned, and it went on to greater strengths.
One of the strangest things I never really understood about the political culture of 2008, and it shocked me because I know from reading history, dating back to say 1981, 1982, there used to be in the political culture a kind of recognition of the limits of the power of the state to make the world a better place. So Reagan came into office. He cut taxes. There was a big recession. There was a widespread sense that, well, let's just kind of wait it out, let the correction happen, and then we'll get back on the path to recovery. And indeed, more or less, that's what happened, right? But in 2008, it was strange. It was like nobody dared utter those words. Mistakes were made in the past. We're paying the price for it now. Let's just pay the price and then move on to a beautiful future. Instead, there was this weird and very widespread bipartisan conviction that all the energy of state power has to immediately be employed to stop this devil recession, from happening. And trillions of dollars later, and 6 years later, we're still, the U.S. in any case, is stuck in this economic stagnation, which I think you and I would have predicted. But it was a strange feature of the political culture of the time that doing nothing just wasn't an option.
Right, and I think you hit the nail on the head when you say that it was a kind of bipartisan conviction. I mean, nobody in the political landscape of 2008 was willing to stand up and say, I'm not going to do anything. I mean, that was akin to political suicide.
Yeah.
The Obamneys and from the left, from the right, from Republicans, elephants, donkeys, whatever. Everybody had to get in there and say, like, I have a solution. I know exactly where the economy ought to go. And not only that, I mean, a vanity in and of itself, but I have the power to get it there. And I know the exact prescription down to the fractions of a percentage where things ought to be tinkered and moved and levers ought to be pushed and pulleys pulled and whatever. I mean, it was really just there wasn't an iota of humility to be found in the 2008 election, and now we're going on, as you say, years later, with trillions and trillions of dollars having been printed. We don't know where this is going to end up, but the opportunity cost for the market is enormous and skyrocketing, because every minute that we spend inking freshly printed bills, or subsidizing this particular industry, or banning out that particular industry, or funneling cash to this preferred party, or this lobbying group. Every moment that is spent in that endeavor is a moment that isn't spent building a brighter and better world.
There's also a very strange and spooky lack of recognition about the obvious failure. That's also strikes me. I mean, like none of their predictions became true. We're still languishing in this recession, and yet the political culture is still, in a kind of denial about the utter and complete failure of these policies. And it's very strange to me, actually. It's something I never quite can get over studying, is the persistence of failure in the political system. It's like Soviet socialism, right? So 70 years of this nonsense, and finally it collapses. 70 years went by, right? Or in the case of the Iraq War, 25 years of bombings and intervention, and we still don't have the results we want. And here we are, 6 years in recession, and there's still not an awareness or a widespread conviction that anything really went wrong. It's amazing how political systems can just kind of sustain themselves in the suspension of realism for so long.
Right. Well, they just kind of, I mean, it's the only thing that they can do with any kind of predictable regularity is fail, and it gets to the stage where you imagine the state to be this kind of, this terrible Ouroboros that is self-feeding on its own, lack of ability. And so it seems like it's the mirror opposite of everything that happens right in the market, happens wrong with the state. So, from every time you stand, at a Walmart and buy something and have nice people come over to help you and serve you and try and make your day brighter and better, and then you go to a TSA line. And it's the exact opposite. I mean, these people are these brutish thugs who subject you to all kinds of dehumanizing, humiliating kinds of procedures, and people line up like it's some privilege that they're getting that they're being felt up by a complete stranger, and people are going through their private belongings. I mean, in what other walk of life would a decent person stand by while somebody just invaded their privacy with such unapologetic abandon? There's only one place that any person would tolerate this at all, and that happens to be when some guy's there, or some lady with a tin badge and a smile from the government. And then all of a sudden we put our hands up and we say, well, we'll go along with whatever you have to, whatever crazy procedure you request of us, because it's my patriotic duty, or I'm making the plane safer, or whatever other kind of.
And it's not just procedures; it's actually stealing stuff. I mean, I was just a few days ago in line at TSA, and some guy had I don't know, I think it was like a jar of like a hair product, I think, and I'm pretty sure it was a kind of hair coloring gel, and he had this kind of beautiful mop of a hair, and the hair gel must have been actually rather expensive. So the TSA, is digging through his bag and then proudly, pulls out the offending, evil thing inside there and said, this has got to go. Yeah, and so suddenly, it was stolen from him, and he was like personally devastated. I mean, this is a man like deeply devoted to his hair product.
Yeah, well, it's kind of the, I mean, Orwell was a socialist, but he was also totally right when it comes to newspeak and this weird kind of agenda and bizarre reality that happens when we talk about the political sphere, and that things that we ordinarily would rebel against just because we know them to be acts of violence and aggression, when it happens in the governmental realm, we not only do we expect it, we thank them. We thank them for doing this kind of stuff, for keeping us safe and for inflating our currency. And what would we do without you? The roads would have potholes, and nobody would be able to work anything out, and there'd be no voluntary interactions where people provide things and help one another and cooperate. The entire fabric of society would just be torn apart were it not for these angelic congressmen who order daily life for us and make existence on this planet possible. I mean, it's such a weird vanity. But we we permit this to exist all the time. And I was actually just having a conversation with a fellow the other day on our Facebook page, and he was so committed to the idea that we needed to return to the Constitution and change can be brought about by the at the ballot box, and it was almost kind of like an impenetrable zealotry. There's no changing these people's minds. I mean, you can point out, for example, as Spooner did with, the Constitution has either been impotent to protect against the kind of government we have, or it's actually caused it and enabled it. You can say to these people, hey, look, we've tried this experiment. It didn't work. You know what the definition of insanity is. We don't want to do this again, committing, progeny to the same kind of disastrous outcomes that we're undergoing right now. Huge amounts of debt, welfare, warfare state, et cetera, et cetera. But you can literally boil it down to a petri dish, kind of scientific experiment and say, hey, it didn't work. Why would we want to do something again that demonstrably ends in disaster? Oh, well, if we just try it again a different way, and, no, we need something different. We don't need another, well-intentioned individual going to their grave with a waving the vote the bombs out flag, because, Washington has nothing if not a proliferation of new assholes. So it's not going to be, you can't vote the bombs out. They are infinite, and they will keep lining up as long as we go to the ballot box. We have to try something different.
Yeah, and this is what's wonderful. You and I have both kind of chronicled the change of the world since 2008. I mean, here you had the ultimate failure of both the political system, the financial system, the banking system, the money system, like everything. And there's a certain group of rebels in that very year that finally said, okay, that's it. We're going to have to recreate a new world. And the most conspicuous sort of institution that was created in that time was Bitcoin. You were all over it much sooner than I was. But, it represents a kind of, not just a brilliant innovation, but a kind of rebellion against not just politics, but the political system itself as a means of change. I mean, it's like Satoshi Nakamoto and that generation of code slingers said, well, if we can't get reform from the top, we're going to have to just do it ourselves.
And isn't that a beautiful? I mean, isn't the whole philosophy behind this of kind of peaceful resistance? It's not. We're not taking arms, down to march on DC and hanging politicians by the lampposts, et cetera, although there's a good many people in the movement who would quite like to see that. But this is a peaceful defunding of the state. It's rather than occupying Wall Street, it's vacating. It's saying, hey, you guys can exist on your plane of violence and aggression, but we're actually just going to pick up and sort of move over here and create a whole new beautiful marketplace by ourselves. And we're going to do it, first of all, without asking for permission, because obviously no free individual believes that they require permission to exist and act voluntarily. But we're going to build everything ourselves. We're going to interact freely with one another. We're going to bring about a complete decentralization of political power by the only vote that counts, and that's the voluntary vote in the marketplace of moving away, moving towards a far superior model. And isn't it a far superior model? I mean, we have frictionless transactions around the world instantaneously. We're getting our arms around the security of it, but because it is a free market, the mistakes are being learned very, very quickly. So when there's a correction or an exchange goes down, for example, as happened with Mt. Gox, the community immediately learns the lessons from that, and they become more and more resilient. It's the poster child for an anti-fragile market that learns and adapts and evolves and grows to service people in new and different ways all the time. Only because we don't have politicians in there, it's meddling things up. It's a completely voluntary and free marketplace, and it's wonderful to see.
I don't know if I've ever thanked you for this, but you remember in the spring of 2013, it was just developing a new sort of public consciousness toward Bitcoin. I had just discovered Bitcoin in February. You had known about it for, I don't know, probably the previous 12 months, maybe 24 months, something like that. And we were kind of working together, or yeah, we were more or less working together. And I had moved into the Bitcoin space, and I think it was about $20 or something like that when I first recommended it. Or at least started writing about the subject, and then there was a big kind of run-up. It reached something like $240, and then began to crash down again. And I'm pretty sure you were in Argentina at the time. But I kind of sweated it out that day. I mean, I'm not going to lie, I was actually like freaked out a little bit because, a lot of people moved into the space on my recommendation. Suddenly, it was a micro bubble. I mean, in retrospect, this is just irrelevant, right? But at the time, that seemed enormous. Over the course of 2 or 3 days, falling from like 240 down to 80, there was widespread panic. And at the time, you and I were on IM, and I was bugging you like every 15 minutes, to quote the price to you. Do you remember this? And I would say, "Oh my God, Joel, look what's happening to the price. Oh my God, look what's happening now." And you finally, in frustration, you just like sort of said and you're very sweet in your way, but you finally said very bluntly, "Turn off that price ticker. This is an anti-fragile technology. Yes, there will be swings, but we're in for the long haul. So just cut it out, calm down, and get on with your life." Do you remember that?
I do remember that. I do remember that, and it was, it's it's unlikely that we'll have this going on again, and maybe next time I'll be IMing you and saying, "Oh my God, Jeffrey, the price of Bitcoin has crashed $200, and the fate of the world hangs in the balance," and et cetera, et cetera. But this is something that's that's going to happen for quite a bit longer. I think there's going to be real serious corrections, more so than most of us would like to believe. But if you sort of sit next to that constantly updating app and check it all the time, whatever, I mean, either you believe that it's going to work or you don't, and you're either in for an investment or a speculation, and you hope that you can time the highs and lows, which obviously nobody can ever do, or you are convicted in more of a, more than just a kind of like a day trader way. You actually see it as a new realm, and as a new way of transacting, and all of that beauty that goes along with it. So I think turning the constantly updating price off is very, very good for your mental health. It helps you sleep at night. It cuts down on your need to imbibe a lot of cheap grain alcohol, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, to me, it was a great illustration of the difference between like I, on the other hand, I was a very naive, confused, insecure, about things, and a little bit panicked. And this is when people's investment decisions really go wrong, right? At that very moment of panic. That's why you buy high and sell low, and to have a mentor like you, on the other end, introducing an element of maturity and calm and good humor was priceless for me, actually, that day.
That's too kind. I'm sure I was probably panicking off screen.
But in the meantime, of course, it's up to 6 cents. Here's the other thing that amuses me about Bitcoin, and we talk about Bitcoin on a number of levels. I mean, it's a beautiful technology. Just the way it works and transferring value, all over the world instantly at very low fees, and it's wonderful. But it comes into the world through these very contentious and volatile investment markets, So it's a messy process, and keeping those things straight, technology on the one hand, and then entering into a market filled with volatility and fraudsters and confusion. It's hard to sometimes keep the balance right. between those two.
Yeah, it is, but it's I kind of think of it as, I mean, at one stage, people flocked by the millions from the old world over to the new world, and they came over to the Americas, and they pushed the frontier out to the Wild West. And I can't imagine that would have been easy. And I can't imagine that blood wasn't spilled, and that mistakes weren't made, and that hearts weren't broken, et cetera, and people got bruised knees and black eyes and all that kind of stuff. But the ensuing centuries after that chaos, and indeed the chaos continues to this day, but were hugely beneficial and hugely fruitful in moving the entire human experience forward. So it's these messy kind of frontier pushing undertakings that we experience, that where the real change happens. Change doesn't happen at the nipple of the bell curve. It happens right out there on the fat tails,
Right.
where things get messy and where it gets kind of chaotic, and as I said, hearts get broken, knees get bruised. But that's there right out on the fringe is the real experience. And it's
Yeah, I know that in the old days, in the 19th century, when many young men went to the West for gold, California gold rush and everything. Many people died on the way, actually, but the people who made it to the end got rich. So it's just.
And I mean, not to sort of be cavalier about it, but it's on the shoulders of these people that we stand. It's on the shoulders of the people who forged new inroads that we from whom we benefit now. So it's the kind of whack jobs and crazies and weirdos that decided, hey, I'm going to uproot my life from my nice little place here in old Blighty or whatever, and go over to this this weird new frontier out in the western states of the U.S. But it's those people and those kind of crazy endeavors that they undertook that we get to learn from now. So I always try and keep that in mind when people talk about, Bitcoin, for example. What a crazy idea. This is obviously never going to take off. Who would go in for this kind of, weirdo, whatever, defunding the police state, and this is all kind of this utopian nonsense that you're talking about? Well, I imagine that the people that pushed frontiers in the past were also likewise labeled as nut jobs and contenders for insane asylum.
I love watching the rise of a new aristocracy in our time, entirely based on digital technology and what they're able to do to the world. I don't know if you know the name Roger Ver or Veer.
Yes. I met Roger down in Argentina. It was the first. I don't know if it was the first South American, but it was certainly the first Bitcoin conference in Argentina.
Right.
And Roger down there and a few of the other names, I guess you'd say, in the space. And what really struck me at that conference was, you and I have been going to gold bug conferences and the like for many years, and it was people tend to be a little doomy and gloomy, and rah the government's regulating my business to death and all that kind of stuff. Obviously we need to talk about that, but the big difference was at this conference, everybody was optimistic, everybody was upbeat, everybody had new solutions and new products they wanted to bring to market and new ideas of how they were going to meet this demand or solve this problem. Or everybody was really, really optimistic about the future because they were operating in a market where they could test ideas, where they were free to fail as well as they were free to succeed. So there was a real rush of enthusiasm and optimism, the likes of which I hadn't seen at any any kind of gloom and doom conference for some time.
That same sense that you just described was exactly what I experienced at my first Bitcoin conference, and everyone's sense. These people are living in the future, and it's very beautiful. Roger Ver has done a beautiful thing for Liberty.me. He's now teaching courses in our live classroom that occurs in the U.S. in the evening. But he's also offered $1 in Bitcoin free for any new member of Liberty.me. So when you join, you just give your public address in the discussion forums, and the Roger Ver, the Bitcoin Jesus, as he's known, will send you $1 in Bitcoin. So that's just a really wonderful thing, because he's in favor of promoting adoption and wants to help good people do that.
Well, I meant to say at the beginning of our discussion here, but huge congratulations for what you're doing at Liberty.me, and it's no surprise that somebody with the kind of integrity that Roger has would like to come and promote Liberty.me and Bitcoin along with it, because it's a really important work that you're doing, and I couldn't think of a better person to be championing it, both you and Roger. So congratulations.
Thank you, and likewise on your Free Market Cafe. It always appears on my Facebook feed. I love to get your stuff because it's radical, it's interesting, it's intelligent. You're sort of doing for the world now what you did for me in the spring of 2013, which is bringing a certain level of insight, radicalism, but also maturity to the whole space. So congratulations to you, and everyone who's listening to this should go and like that page, Free Market Cafe on Facebook, and similarly with Liberty.me. So there we go. There's our quid pro quo promotion for the day, right?
Exactly.
Well, Joel, it's been too long since we've talked. Let's don't let so much time go by before we do this again.
Indeed. Thanks for everything, Jeffrey.
All the best to you, my friend.
Bye-bye. Bye.